I think I'm going to do the whitewash today.
Okay, I find this a problem. Um, when I adjust certain things, it's like I partly lose the zoom. I made a enlarge, watch what's going to happen. Instead of when I adjusted the sound, it happened when I change the size of the screen, if I minimize it. So I'm going to
Why
leave
do
it.
you, okay. What happens if you try to drag your picture down? Is that, or what happens if,
See, it doesn't,
no, that's not what I mean. The box.
I can't do that.
Okay. What about,
That's it. That doesn't do it. That just tells you who the participants.
right,
Good
right.
morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay.
All right. I'll let you go.
All right. I'm not sure where the other guys are, but we're going to get underway. I'll start with the sponsors and then we'll go into our text. All right. Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Koningsberg in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara, Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg in memory of their dear friend, Julian Smith, Malcolm Mann in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Rav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon. Cheryl Schur, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. Have a week of learning sponsored by Michael and Sharon Glass, in memory of his father, Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yechiel Michal. Also today, a day of learning plus Torah fund, sponsored by Harriet Brick, in memory of her husband, David Pinchas ben Zorach Dov. And that is it for today. May the Neshamas have an Aliyah, Kranker Afia, Velta, Yeshua, Shema Tzliah, and the Chol B'nai Israel, a good Gaben Shtiyar. Okay. All right. We are on Pei Amud Aleph. Okay. And we are about 4 lines down on the top of the Amud. Okay. We're coming back to the question of what is used to make the Shituf Mavuot. Okay. And the question we said, we saw that there was a qualification there of having to raise the barrel, assuming that they use wine, at least a tefach off the ground. Okay. Bob, you can hear me okay?
Yep. Good.
Right? Okay. All right. So Gemara picks up Meitive. Bright is going to challenge what seemed to be presented before, right? Ketzad mishtatfin b'mabui. How is it that one participates in a shituf mabuot? Mevi'in chavit shel yayin. Okay, one can bring a barrel, a keg, okay, of wine, v'shel shemen, of oil, v'shel tmarim, of dates, v'shel grogorot, or of dried dates, or dried figs, v'shel sha'ar minei perot, or other kinds of fruit, produce, Im mishelo, if they belong to one individual in the area. Excuse me a second. Okay. If they belong just to one person, says the Mishnah, right? Tzarich lezakot. He has to be zocher, make the privilege of allowing those people in the chatzer or the other chatzerot. He has to give them a sense of ownership. Okay? Ve'im mishelahen, but if they've all contributed together, tzrich lahodia. He must then inform them, notify them that their food is being used and they're included in the shituf. Umagbia min hakarka mashu, and he must raise up that chavit a certain amount. Mai mashu, what do we mean by a certain amount? Nami de ka'amar tefach. Also, as was said, it has to be a tefach. So while the issue of raising the barrel is not challenged by this braita, the contents of the barrel is expanded, more than just wine, but other items too. Okay. Now, Itmar says the text, the following, okay, Shitufei Mevuot, regarding the idea of Shituf Mavuot, okay, what was further said about it? Rav Amar, Ein Sarich Lezakot. According to Rav, one does not have to confer ownership on the other residents. Ushmuel Amar Tzarich Lezakot. However, Shmuel disagrees and says the individual putting out, okay, his own foodstuffs does have to confer ownership on the other residents. Eruvei Tchumim, with regards to an Eruv Tchum, another Sabbath boundary, Rav Amar Tzrich Lezakot. Rav says when one puts foodstuffs out there, one has to confer ownership to the other people. Shmuel Amar Ein Tzarich Lezakot. And Shmuel says one does not have to confer ownership on the other people. Bishlema l'Shmuel hachatnan. That's acceptable according to Shmuel, as we see he taught here. Vahacha lo tanan. Okay, so we hear Shmuel teaches yes, shituf requires conferring ownership, but eruv tchumim no. Ela Rav, but as far as Rav is concerned, my Tama, what's his reasoning? Tanaihi. It seems to be a machloket Tanaim regarding Erev Tchumim. Da Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Ma'aseh bekalato shel Rabbi Yoshai. There was an incident with the daughter-in-law of Rabbi Yoshai, shehalcha lebeit hamerchatz, that she went to the bathhouse, the wash house, right? V'chashcha la, and it got dark, right? This is Erev Shabbat. It became dark already. V'irva la chamota, and her mother-in-law made an eruv, right? What happened, says the Gemara? Uba ma'aseh lifnei Rabbi Chia v'asar. And Rabbi Chia, okay, was presented with this incident, and he forbade her from returning home, okay, since apparently the merchatz was beyond the tchum. Now, what happened? Amar lo Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yossi, says to him, Bavli, a Babylonian, kol kach ata machmir be'eruvin, are you so stringent, excuse me, in regards to eruv? Okay, kach amar Abba. This is what father, in other words, his father Rabbi Yossi said. Kol sheyesh lach lahakel be'eruvin hakel. Wherever it's possible to be lenient in regards to the laws of Eruvin, it's permissible to be lenient. V'abaye laho. Okay? And so therefore we say they asked him the following. Why, what was the rationale, okay, that we see here that that in this case, okay, Rabbi Chia was Oser, was more stringent. Okay, what was his line of thinking, so to speak? Mishel Chamuta Irvala. Is it possible that the mother-in-law used her own food to make the Eruv? Umishum delo zichtala. And because she didn't confer ownership on the daughter-in-law, therefore that's why he forbade her to come back. O Dilma Mishela Irvala. Okay, or maybe the mother-in-law used the daughter-in-law's own food to make the Eruv, or perhaps it was done without her knowledge, and therefore that's the reason it could not be included in the Eruv Tchumim, and therefore that was his reasoning. The Gemara continues. Amar lahem, hahumi Rabbanan, v'Rabbi Yaakov Shmei. So one of the rabbis, and Rabbi Yaakov was his name, responds and says, Lididi mifresha la mine the Rabbi Yochanan. That this was explained to me personally by Rabbi Yochanan. That what was Rabbi Chia's view, namely, Mishel Chamuta Irva, that the foodstuffs belonged to the mother-in-law that was used to join the Eruv Tchumim. Shum delo zichtala, and it was because she did not confer ownership on her. That's why Rabbi Chia forbade her. Now, Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rabbi Yaakov. Okay, so Rabbi Zera then responds to this particular Rabbi Yaakov, Berei de Bat Yaakov, who was the son of Bat Yaakov, and said to him, Ki matit hatam. Okay, right? He said to him, when you reach there, in other words, you're now in Bavel, and when you go to Eretz Yisrael and you go there, I don't want you to go the direct route. In other words, through Damascus. I want you to go a more circuitous route. At Akif, go around. Vizil l'sulma detzur, and go by means of the heights of Tyre. In other words, go by the coastal route. Okay? In other words, go out and then get off and then travel inland. Why? The Summa Detzur. Ubai mine mirav Yaakov ba'idi. And when you're there, you'll ask this question, discuss this issue with Rabbi Yaakov ba'idi. So Gemara goes on and tells us, Ba'i mine, okay, he asked him the following, Mishel chamuta erva, with the foodstuffs joined for the Eruv Tchumim, the mother-in-laws, umishum delo zichtala, and because the mother-in-law did not confer ownership on the daughter-in-law, is that why Rabbi Chia forbade her? O Dilma, or perhaps Mishela Irva, the foodstuffs belonged to the daughter-in-law, and that was put together, joined for the Eruv Chatzeros, Eruv Tchumim, Umishum D'Shalom Mida'ata, and it was forbidden for her because it was not with her knowledge. Amarle, okay, so Rab Yaakov Bar Idi responds to him, Mishel Chamuta Irvala, the foodstuffs belong to the mother-in-law, Umishum de lo zichtala, and because she did not confer ownership upon her. Okay, so this incident, as a result, implies that for Erev Tchumim, one does need to confer ownership. And that then goes back, okay, to what we saw earlier, okay, where the example was, all right, that Rav said that one has to confer ownership. Now, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman now adds, Naktinan, we have in Masorah, Echad Eruvei Tchumim, Ve'echad Eruvei Chatzerot, Echad Shitufei Mevu'ot. Namely, the same item applies to an Eruv Tchumim, the same applies to Eruv Chatzerot, and the same applies to making a Shituf Mevu'ot, Tzarich Lezakot. One must confer ownership on the other individuals. Now, by Rav Nachman came and raised the following issue. Eruvei Tavshilin. What do we have? Another kind of Eruv, right? On an occasion when we have Yom Tov followed by Shabbat, and we must, so to speak, mix foods together so that we can cook from Yom Tov to Shabbat. Okay, so what happens here? What about this? Tzarich l'zakot or ein tzarich l'zakot? Must one confer ownership then? Okay, or one does not need to confer ownership. After all, we've just got through saying that in the other three cases of Tchumim, Chatzerot, and Mevu'ot, Rav Nachman said that you do need to convey ownership. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Umay tibayile, lo shamiale. Okay, why are you bothering to ask about this? Didn't you hear the following? The Amar Rav Nachman bar Rav Ada, Amar Shmuel. That Rav Nachman, the son of Adar, said in the name of Shmuel, Eruvei Tavshilin, Tzrich Lezakot, that an Eruv Tavshilin, one must confer ownership. Amar le Abai, and the Abai responds as follows. Pshita, it's obvious, Delo Shamiale, that he didn't learn it or didn't hear it. The Ish Shamiale, because if he had heard it and learned it, Mai Tabaile, why would he have asked about it? Amarle, and he responded back to Abai, Atu Eruve Tchumi, since you were dealing with Eruv Tchumi, Milo Amar Shmuel Ein Sarich Lezakot, did not Shmuel say in that case that one doesn't have to confer ownership? Va'amar Ihu Tzrich Lezakot. And here he says in regards to this, okay, that one does have to confer ownership. Hachi hashta. Now, what kind of a comparison is this? Bishlema hatam plige Rav u'Shmuel. It's understandable because in regards to Eruv Tchumim, there's a machloket, an argument between Rav and Shmuel. V'kam mashmalan, ki chomrim damar, v'ki chomrim damar. And we understand, therefore, that what Rav Nachman was telling us, in that machloket, one takes the stringencies of one master, okay, namely Rav, that you do have to confer ownership in regards to Tchumim, but you also take the stringencies of the other master, namely Shmuel, in having to confer ownership in regards to Erev Chatzeros. Aval Hacha, but in this case, when we say we're talking about Erev Tefillin, Ita de Shemiale, if he had learned it, right? Mi Ika Deman de Pali. Do we have any kind of a machloket here? Okay, so the Gemara continues. Okay, now instead to try to give us a story which will highlight and explain the issue. And the story goes as follows. Hahu Torzina. There is a certain, some say it's a military person, others say it's a superintendent of some kind. Dahava b'shivavute the Rabbi Zera. And he lived in the neighborhood of Rabbi Zera. Amarle ogir lach reshutach. And Rabbi Zera said to him, since apparently he's in that neighborhood, I would like to rent your property. Lo agir laho. He would not rent it to them. Atu lekame de Rabbi Zera. Okay? So therefore they came, the people of the Chatzer, of the community, came to Rabbi Zera. Amrule, and they said to him, Mahu lamigar de beitaihu. What about the possibility of renting it from his wife? Amar lahu, he said to them, Hachi amar Reish Lakish, Mishmei de Gavra Rabba, Umano. This is what Reish Lakish said in the name of a important great person, and who was it? Rabbi Hanina. Namely, this is what he says, Ishto shel Adam ma'arevet shalomi da'ato, that a woman, wife of a man, may join in an Eruv without his knowledge. Now, so the answer would seem to be that Rabbi Zera could tell them yes, that they could rent from the wife of this Torzina. Now, another story to try to further clarify. Hahu Torzina, there was a different military or official, right? Dahava Bashivu Vute, the Rav Yehuda Bar Oshaya. And he lived this was in the neighborhood of Rav Yehuda Bar Hoshaya. Amre le, the people said to him, Oger lach reshutech, okay, we were to rent your property. Lo oger laho, he would not rent to them. Atu lekame de Rav Yehuda Bar Hoshaya, they went and brought the issue before Rabbi Yehoshua Bar Hoshaya. Amre le, and he said to him, Mahu lamigar midabutaihu, right? They said, is it possible to rent the property from his wife? Lo hava biyade. He didn't have an answer. Atu lekame de Rav Matana. They went and brought it before Rav Matna. Lo hava biyade. Again, he didn't have an answer for them. Atu lekame de Rav Yehuda. Then they brought it before Rav Yehuda. Amar lahu, and he said to them, Hachi amar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Ishto shel Adam ma'arevet shalomi da'ato. That the wife of a man may join in the Eruv without his knowledge. Now, there seems to be at least two practical examples, right, that give us an answer. However, the Gemara is not satisfied. Meitive. We're going to challenge this with a Braita. And the Braita says, Nashim she'irvu v'shenishtatfu shelo midat ba'alehem. Women, wives, who join in an Eruv or participate in a Shituf Mevuot without the knowledge of their husbands, excuse me, Ein Eruvan Eruv. it is not considered a valid eruv. Ve'ein shitufan shituf, nor is it going to be considered a valid shituf mevuot. Lo kasha. It's not really a problem, says the Gemara. Ha de asar, ha de lo asar. In one case, okay, where it's permitted, in the other case where it's not permitted. Okay, in one case, it's where the husband clearly forbade there be any rent of the property. In the other case, it's where the husband did not prohibit any rental of the property. Or we might say, in one case, it's where he's has participated beforehand. Okay, all right. And in another case, it's where he did not participate. Hachanami mistabra, and this seems logical. The alkain kasha, the Shmuel as the Shmuel, because otherwise we would have a problem of one statement of Shmuel being inconsistent, difficult with another statement of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel has said, Echad mi b'nei mabui, sheragil lehishtatev im b'nei mabui, velo nishtatev. Okay, one who normally had participated in the shituf mabuot with others, okay, and then did not participate. B'nei hamabui nichnasin letoch beito, the other residents, let's say, off that court, off that alleyway, may enter his house. V'notlin shitafan mimenu ba'al korcho, and they may take something from his home to use as a contribution, as a item to be included in the shituf mabuot. Ragil, okay, yes, and if he was used to participating, yes. She'ein ragil, no. If he's not used to participating, no, that's not the case. Now, lo shamamine, what happens? Okay, if we say, okay, then he can't. Shmamina, what do we learn from this? Lema misayeh le, this comes to support, right? The Braita supports that says, Kofino to la'asot lechi v'kore lemabui. Okay, that therefore we can compel a resident of that, off that alleyway to help make and contribute for a lechi or a kore for that particular alleyway. Okay, just as the same way we can compel them to participate in the shituf. Okay, now, however, the Gemara continues on the top of the Amud. All right, and what do we see here? Shani hatam deleka michitzot. The problem there, though, was the fact that in that particular case, there were no partitions on that. There were no walls in regards to that mabui. Okay, and okay, so if we look at, okay, and this particular section of the Gemara is very problematic. Okay, right? We're going to see that in a second. Why? Because then the Gemara says lashon acher, okay, mitzad shani. Okay, from the side, it's different. Lishna achrina, from the side, it's different. So what does it mean from the side? It's different. Okay, so both Art Scroll and Koren have long notes on this particular phrase. Okay, saying they think that this is either a scribal error or some other, could be other language. And I point out for those using Art Scroll on 80B1 note number 2, okay? You can see there the note, okay, that basically says that the language should be different here, okay? Because there's no way that you can, let's say, take the view of the tzad, okay, and say, well, it's a different way of carrying or a different way of bringing or something like that, okay? So we're going to continue there, okay? And Koren has like 3 or 4 paragraphs on this same issue, all bringing variety of mafarshim, all whom have problems with this word or two. Okay. Now, itmar. On this, however, okay, on this business of the Korah and Lechi, the following was said. Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar, he says, Osim Lechi Ashira, that one may use wood from a tree that had been used for Avodah Zarah to build the Lechi. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, Osin Korah Ashera. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, one could also use wood from an Asherah tree to make the Korah, to make the beam. So the Gemara asks, Man de Amar Korah, the one who says that they could use that wood for the beam, namely Reish Lakish, Kol Shekain Lechi. How much more so the Lechi? Remember, there's a big difference between how thick the beam has to be across versus just a small post, right? Uman de Amar Lechi, but according to the one who says, namely, that it could be a Lechi, all right, that was Rav Chia bar Ashi, Aval Kore lo, but the Kore, it cannot be. Why? Ketute michtat shiure. Because since the requirement of the wood of an Asherah tree is to be burned, okay, and we see that a Korah is a large, thick beam, we're determining that since it's, so to speak, sentenced to be burned, we're going to consider it as if it's already been destroyed. The size, so to speak, has already been crushed because we've, and not large enough to be a Korah, okay? Because since it's been decreed to be burned, we consider it as if it's not usable. Okay? All right.
All right.
Let's go on now with a new Mishnah in a second. Okay. In all these cases, remember we've said whether it's an Erev Chatzerot, Shituf Mevuot, Erev Tchumim even, okay, there has to be a certain amount of foodstuffs placed there, correct? As we said, wine, it could be oil, it could be bread. What happens if the food amount has decreased? Nitma'et ha'ochel, says the Mishnah, okay, that the shituf, in this case, food, right, became diminished from the amount that was originally put there before Shabbat. Mosif umizakeh, okay, then an individual may add food, but in doing so, he must also confer ownership again to those other residents. Ve'ein sarich lahodia, the Mishnah says, but he doesn't have to inform them that he's increased the foodstuffs. However, the Mishnah continues, nitosfu alehen, if there were additional people who came to the Chatzerah or Chatzerot to that mabui. Okay, what happens? Mosif umizakeh. One has to add the foodstuffs and confer ownership. Utsarich lahodia. And then that one is expected to inform all of the participants in the Shituf Mabuot. Okay? Kamahu shiuran, but how much then does the person put in? Right? Bisman shahen merubin. At the time when there are quite a number of individuals, right? What do we say there? Okay. Mazon shtei seudot lekulam. There must be enough foodstuffs, okay, so that 2 meals for one person, okay, for all of them. Right? Now, that's a lot of food. Okay? On the other hand, Bazman Shahen Muatin, when there are only a small number of people, Kigrogoret, Bechol Echad Ve'echad. It's sufficient that there be one dried fig, enough for each person. Okay? Now, further on, next part of the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yossi, B'med Dvarim Amorim, what are we talking about? B'tchilat Eruv, at the very outset of the Eruv. Aval, B'shirei Eruv, but what's left over with the Eruv, Kol Shehu, so long as there is at least some amount left. V'lo Amru La'arev B'chatzerot. Okay? But what happens here, right? Right, is what he's saying, right? That, but the sages do not say that the members, the residents in the Chatzer must make a Eruv Chatzerot if they've already made a Shituf Mavuot. Ela kadei shelo l'shkeach et hatinakot. But they should nevertheless do so that the children who live, okay, in the various chatzerot will not learn that that's not necessary, or they won't forget the practice. Okay? So again, this seems to tell us that a shituf mevuot, okay, of joining a number of courtyards together takes precedence over an Eruv Chatzerot. Now, Gemara B'mayis Kinim, what are we talking about here? Ilema B'min Echad. If you're talking about what the food stuff that they used to make the shituf was all of the same variety, Mai area nitma'et. Why are we then concerned about it decreasing? Afilu kalanami, even if it was totally used up. The fact that the Eruv, the Shituf, was valid at the beginning means it's valid throughout the whole Shabbat. Ela b'shnei mini. But rather we're talking about a situation where perhaps 2 different varieties of items, 2 different types were used. Afilu nitma'et, and then even if they did become decreased. Nami lo, there also we don't have to inform them. The Tanya, kalaha ochel mimin echad, because we have a braita that says if the foodstuffs were finished and they were all of a single variety, ein tzarich lahodia, one does not have to inform the other residents. Mishnei minim tzarich lahodia. But if the foodstuffs came of 2 different varieties or more, then one has to inform the inhabitants, the other residents. Ibayat ema. So the Gemara now says as follows. All right? I could ask, right? I might say, mimin echad ve'ibayet ema mishnei minim. Okay? Or in other words, I might ask a question or be concerned about one variety. I might ask a question or be concerned if it's from two varieties. Ibayet ema mimin echad. I might be concerned and ask the question. Okay, if it's from one varieties, mai nitma'et. What do we mean when we say that the foodstuffs were reduced? Nit mat mate, that they sort of crumbled away. The ibayat ema mishne meaning, and I might be concerned and ask the question.
What about
from two varieties? Kala, that was totally used up. Shani, and we say that that's different. Okay, that's a different case. All right. Now we come back to our Mishnah. Nitosfu alehen mosifu mezaker v'chule. If additional people came to that chatzer or those chatzerot, okay, and wanted to be part of the shituf mevuot, what's the situation? We said he adds and he has to confer ownership and inform. Amar Rav Shizbi, says Rav Shizbi, Amar Rav Chisda. Zot omeret, what does this tell us? Chalukin alav chaverav al Rabbi Yehuda. That the colleagues of Rabbi Yehuda disagreed with him. Ditnan, because it was taught in a Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, b'med varim amorim. What are we talking about? Be'eruvei tchumim. We're talking about eruv tchumim. Aval be'eruvei chatzerot, but with a eruv chatzerot, ma'arvin bein ladat or bein shalom ladat. One can there join, whether it's with their knowledge or without their knowledge. Pshita dechaluki. No, it's obvious that the others disagreed with him. Mahu detema. Then what are you trying to tell us here? Hanimili bechatzer shebein shnei mevuot. We're talking about a situation where that, excuse me, particular courtyard was located between two separate alleyways. And even though he could have done a shituf for alley number one, the people in the Chatzer, nevertheless, always have the option to go out the other alleyway, alley number two. Mahu detema. So what then are you talking about? Hanimili b'chatzer shebein shnei muvuot. We're talking then, we said, about a chatzer between two alleyways. Aval chatzer shemabui echad. But where the courtyard only, let's say, emptied out into one alleyway, emelo, I would say no. He doesn't have to inform them. Kamashmalan comes to teach us the opposite. That he does. Okay. New piece again. Kama hu shiro v'chule. How much, right? Kama hu merubim. What do we say when there's a lot? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Shmona esrei b'nei adam. 18 people. Shmona esrei v'tulo. There are 18 people living in that courtyard and no more. Ema mi shmona esrei v'elech. So I'll say, say it's minimally 18 people and more. Umay shmona esrei nedekat. And so why did he choose the number 18? Rav Yitzchak b'rei de Rav Yehuda. L'didi mifresha li mane da Abba. He said, Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, that it was explained to me personally by father. Kol she'ilu mechalko lemazon shtei seudot b'neihen. So long as there's the opportunity, the amount to, right, to divide it up, okay, 2 meal equivalents of food between them, right? Ve'ein magat grogeret b'kol echad ve'echad, right? And each person then would not reach, if that's the case, the amount of a single dried fig. Hein merubim, that's a lot of people. V'sage b'mazon shtei seudot. And it's sufficient then that you have the equivalent of 2 meals for all of them. Okay? Ve'ilo, and if not, hein mu'atin ninhu. If not, then we say there are fewer individuals, right? Right? In other words, they'll get less food. What happens? Va'agav orche kamashmalan. And what happens is, by the way, he also comes to teach us the shtei seudot havyan shmona esrei grogorot, that the equivalent of 2 meals results in an example of 18 dried figs. Okay. Now, a new Mishnah, and we'll just go through the Mishnah today and finish up. Matnitin, says our Mishnah. Okay? Again, food dealing with an Erev or a Shituf. Excuse me. B'chol ma'arvin u'mishtatfin, with all, in other words, all kinds of foodstuffs one might use, chutz min hamayim, with the exception of water, u'min ha'melach, and with the exception of salt. Divrei Rabbi Elazar. That's the view of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, says Rabbi Yoshua, kikar hu eruv. Namely, using a whole loaf of bread is what is appropriate for the eruv. Afilu ma'afa, and even if it's baked already, sa'ah, okay? One could even use it, okay, if it is a amount of a seah of flour. Vahu prusa, and we say that that is an amount, okay, that if it is a prusa, if it's only a piece, if it's broken up, ein ma'arvin ba, then we cannot use it for the eruv. Kikar ki isar, vahu shalem ma'arvin ba. But if you have a whole loaf, even if it's no larger than an isar, than a large Italian coin, let's call it for our talk, let's call it a silver dollar, okay? Or maybe it was the size of a quarter, okay? Whatever we're going to say, right? And it's whole, ma'arvin bo. It is permissible, so long as it's whole, to be used as part of the eruv. Okay? And tomorrow on Pei Aleph, we'll continue with the Gemara on that. Okay? So everybody have a good day. Don't see Harvey this morning. Hope he's okay. All right, and
Sorry, I came a little late.
okay, can happen. All right, everybody, take care and stay well.
Thank you, Rabbi Green. Have a wonderful day. Be well.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Rolf.
Okay. Morning, Ted.
Good morning. The day has started.
Get it started. Yeah.
Very good.
We have a Yarmouth meeting today.
Yeah, we have Ainsley. We'll see what happens.